A few years ago, my brother would get a call on his cell phone around 2, 3 a.m. every night. He would answer, and it was this hellish sounding noise, like static mixed with screams. He changed his cell number after a month of this and just stopped. Then after a week or so, it began again. The exact same noise, exact same time. Finally, one day he decided to backdial the call. It was an old man that had no clue what he was talking about. Still, the calls persisted. If he didn't answer, it would call a few more times. No messages were left. He decided to say screw it, ended his contract with his phone company, switched to a new one, and then got another new number. You guessed it, the screaming static calls continued after a short delay. But this time he was terrified every night, unsure why this was happening. He backed out the number again and got a different person. Around this time he lost his job and his phone. The calls stopped, of course. His phone was disconnected now. So one day my mom asks me to listen to this weird message she got on our home phone. It was a static screaming. We showed my brother and he was freaking out. He backdialed the number again and it said the number was disconnected this time. Never heard from it again after that. I was visiting my family for winter break in Los Angeles. This was about 5 years ago. I was heading to the bathroom on the second floor of my aunt's house when I saw my cousin, April, on the stairs. April was 4 and very animated. She was busy making funny faces while sitting on the stairs. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm copying the lady with the braid." I looked around. There was no one else but us. I asked, "Where is the lady, April?" She pointed to a beam running parallel to the stairwell. I asked April, "What is the lady doing?" She said, "Making funny faces." I smiled and started walking up the stairs again when April said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Her braids are around her neck." I turned back and asked April to repeat herself. April pointed, "The lady is hanging by her braid. She's making funny faces." Then April started making a face, which I then realized was someone gasping for air. When I was younger, I had an imaginary friend who lived in this massive antique dresser. We'd chill out, and I vividly remember him telling me stories, although I have absolutely no recollection of what they actually were. I remember one day talking to my parents about it. My dad traveled quite a bit, so he wasn't up to date with what I was into. And when I started telling him about my dresser buddy, he wanted to know his name. It was something innocent like Peter, but I can still see him going white in the face. I drew Peter out for him, and the very next day he and my uncle took out that dresser and burned it. It wasn't until a few years later that I found out my dad's little brother, my uncle, also had the same friend, with the same name, who lived in the same antique dresser. After a few months of the typical imaginary friend shit, my uncle started having night terrors and couldn't sleep because of Peter. It got so bad that they had to move him out of his room before he managed to get back to normal. Me and my friends were driving home from a show we all went to. This was about 7 years ago or so, in the Cerritos area. There's an elementary school there, I think on 186th. Anyway, we drove by a local elementary school, all of us joking and laughing or whatever 16-year-olds do. And my friend's girlfriend looked over at the playground in the school, screamed, and refused to talk to anyone for a few hours. We all asked her what was wrong, what she saw, what happened, but nothing would make her tell us. We all thought she saw someone on the playground, or a dead body or something. All we knew was that she was seriously spooked. A backstory, I should add that she's sensitive to paranormal happenings. I should also add that I don't really believe in ghosts or the like, but whatever. She would have doors fly open at her old house, clothes hangers fly off the rail, cups fall over, and then right themselves multiple times. Anyway, she eventually told her boyfriend what she had seen. She said that she had briefly seen a bunch of blood-covered people walking around the playground aimlessly. I immediately started blaming exhaustion, as it was around 2 a.m. when we drove by. We looked it up later, and it turns out that a plane had crashed into the school in the late 80s and a lot of people had died. Quite a spooky story. I was about 14, and creepy stuff had been happening in my room. Started with my TV turning off and on at random times of the night. Then it got worse. When I would wake up, there would be dirty handprints around the edge of my ceiling like something was pawing to get out. Then the shadows just moving back and forth around the room. Then the real stuff hit the fan. One night, tapping on the walls and scratching in the ceiling. Scared the shit out of me, but I still didn't tell my dad. Then it happened and I couldn't not tell anyone. I was just sitting there watching TV in my room, and in the creepiest voice I've ever heard, "How are you today?" Like an old lady almost. Packed my things up and ran the fastest I've ever run down my stairs in my life. My brother was downstairs doing whatever when I basically fell down the stairs physically shaking, with him asking what happened and why I was so freaked out. I told my dad about it, and he came home from work, told us to go see a movie while he worked his magic on my room. Everything was fine for many years until I just heard 3 single taps on my wall a few days ago. A few years ago, I went to a Christmas party. That night my housemates went home earlier while I decided to stay and get in the Christmas spirit with a few other friends. I ended up getting pretty hammered and got home around 3 a.m. Instead of going straight to bed, I got another beer inside, then went out the back porch to have a smoke and look at the stars. I was outside a couple of minutes when I see the light go on in the kitchen. My housemate comes out and looks at me from the back. I wave and generally look like a drunk idiot. I thought he was going to come out and get a debrief on the rest of the evening, as there were some good laughs and we had not talked about it yet. Anyway, he just gets a glass of water and goes to bed. I finish my smoke and beer and do the same. The next morning, we're hashing the previous night when he mentions getting up and seeing me having a smoke out the back. "Who came back from the party with you last night?" I give him a sideways look and reply, "No one, dude, I was out there alone." He insists, "Nah man, there was someone out there with you, behind you on the porch, when you were looking inside waiting. I didn't come out because I thought it was some random friend from the Christmas party I didn't know, couldn't be bothered making introductions." To this day he stands by this version of events. Whoever it must have been standing close behind me the whole time, I saw no one and heard nothing. Gives me the chills every time I think about it. My coworker, who I have worked with for the past 5 years, recently told me a story about his daughter when she was about 2 years old. She had imaginary friends like most kids do. One day they went to Japan to visit his wife's parents. They were at a temple when all of a sudden the girl gets excited, points at the wall and yells, "Grandma!" The grandma had died long before she was born. His wife gets confused, saying Grandma is dead, but the daughter is having none of this. The daughter makes his wife walk into the temple and points at a cupboard and says to open the 3rd cupboard. The wife does this, and there's an album of families who used to go to the temple, and the first page has a picture of the grandma. She points at the picture, and sure enough it's her grandma. In conclusion, kids are scary. When I was a teenager, I was big into skateboarding and building ramps. There was a neighborhood being built behind mine, and I'd go over there on the weekends and get scrap wood and bring it back to my house. You had to go through a little bit of woods and cross a creek to get there. I went one day by myself, and when I crossed the creek and started walking through the woods to the construction site, I could hear a man talking. I stood still to try to hear what he was saying. It was getting louder as if he was coming through the woods towards me, and I finally heard what he was saying. "I'm gonna get you." I couldn't hear any leaves crunching, and I never saw anyone. I ran like hell and was slipping while I was trying to climb up the muddy bank in the creek. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, but that's one thing that stuck with me that I can't explain. A few months ago, I had this really scary dream that seemed so real. In my dream, I was in my bed doing something on my laptop. Suddenly, I just had a bad feeling something wasn't right. Like I somehow knew something was in my room with me that shouldn't be there. I jumped off my bed and hurried and flipped my light on. I flip it on just in time to see this weird black shadow sphere thing with legs zoom under my bed. I woke up scared and crying, but it felt so real and I just knew whatever I saw was very evil. The next day, me and my dad were watching one of those ghost shows, like My Ghost Story on TV. In the episode, this woman was in her room, and all of a sudden she felt like something wasn't right. She turned her light switch on just in time to see a weird black shadow sphere thing with legs scurry under her bed. It pretty much looked exactly like the thing I saw in my dream. When I was about 6, I used to sleep in my parents' room with my bed next to theirs. Our home is a single story, and in our room the windows were on opposing sides in the corner. I'd say it was just about midnight. My parents were long asleep and I was still trying to go to sleep. I looked at the right corner window to see the light that came from the auction place next door. Then I saw something walk into view. I could only see the shadow it made through our curtains. It was about 6'6", had a long slanted head, pointed ears, a hooked nose, prominent brow, skinny arms with claws roughly 4 inches long. It kept close to its body and was skeletally thin. It walked into view, paused for about 20 seconds, then kept walking on the ramp to the porch. I heard its footsteps. I was so terrified that I couldn't even move, but eventually gained the courage to pull my blankets over my face.